This episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast is brought to you by Nomadicare. Now, personally, I love Nomadicare. I've used Nomadicare, and I recommend the company to all new travelers. What Nomadicare does is it takes the fear out of getting set up with a bad recruiter, which is the biggest fear that you have jumping into this journey. So they sit down, they interview recruiters, they vet them, get them on a list, and then provide them to you as a free service, as a free recruiter matchmaking service in order to get you started on your journey. Now, usually you only get 2 recruiters going through Nomadicare, but being a listener of the show, you can get 3. So this is how it's going to work. You go to nomadicare.com/Dylan. You will get set up with 3 recruiters to be on your dream team, as well as a guide to get you started on your journey.
The second sponsor of the show is TravCon, the Travelers Conference. I'm super excited to announce them as a sponsor of the show. TravCon was there for me before I got started as a medical nomad, and now I'm actually involved with the planning of the event. So super aligned, super congruent. I've been promoting them before they were even a sponsor, and so I'm excited to have them on. So there are 3 main reasons that you should go to TravCon this year. Number 1, value. This is the cheapest conference to go to as a medical professional. And also the only place that I've ever felt like royalty when you're walking in and all these staffing agencies and all these recruiters want to talk to you and you're bumping elbows with these travelers and they're interested about your story, about where you're coming from and what you're doing. And it's overall just a really good feel-good event. Number 2 is education and growth. So this conference was founded on the realization that there's a lot to know to be a medical traveler, to be a medical nomad. And so this is where you go to get the most updated tax information. This is where you go for those really niche specific questions on what's it like to travel in an RV and what's it like to travel to Hawaii. And then 3rd, community. This is where a lot of my traveler friends that are very near and dear to my heart right now, this is where we met. So this is where the relationship sparked. It's also one of the only places that you get to go to and see the leaders and meet the leaders of the industry, both on the staffing agency side and on the traveler side, and also get to meet your recruiters face-to-face that you've been working with. So TravCon is always in September every year. TravCon is also always in Las Vegas. The link is going to be in the show notes for you to get your ticket. I'll be at TravCon. All my friends will be at TravCon. I hope to see you there. Jake Daly, where are you at in the world right now?
I am in my apartment in Denver, Colorado at the moment.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dylan Callier, and today I am very excited for today's interview. So, Jake, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, kind of what you do, and then we'll get into the questions.
Okay. So my name is Jake Daly. I play wheelchair rugby for the Denver Harlequins here in Denver, and then I'm also on the U.S. national team. I've been on there for 2 years, hoping to make it a 3rd year here in January. We have tryouts again. And then outside of that, I spend a lot of time training, and I also work at a mattress outlet store, I guess, and sell mattress and furniture during the week to pay my bills. So
got it.
It doesn't really pay the bills very well. So
not yet, unfortunately. No. And then you also do some woodworking on the side. Is that right?
Yes and no. I've very recently started getting into it. To say that I do woodworking is a little bit disgraceful to real woodworkers, so I don't want to say that. But yeah, I'm starting to dabble a little.
Now, Jake, we met randomly on an airplane. First time I've ever gotten front row seated. First time I got to sit in the front row, and I happened to look over and I noticed that you had Settlers of Catan on your phone. Yep. Which is like my board game of choice. But so super excited about that, and struck up a conversation. But one of your goals, when I asked you what's your goal, you said that you wanted to build your own house.
Yeah, that would be
which is really cool.
Yeah, I would love to do it. I don't know how feasible it is or realistic, but the idea sounds really intriguing to me, I guess.
For sure. And so you are a USA athlete. Can you give us an idea of kind of what the season looks like and what the training looks like for wheelchair rugby?
So we have a strength and conditioning coordinator. So she plans out like all our training and all our workouts and stuff. So I'm usually doing that like 6 days a week. And then we practice as a team here in Denver twice a week. So the Denver side, the club season, that goes from about October, I guess, into like April, May. And then pretty much all summer is the USA side. So it's pretty much year round, actually.
Wow.
So we got done with Australia, and I had maybe a month and a half, 2 months before our first club tournament. And that was like a really big break. That's pretty, not very common, I guess. Pretty rare to have that long of a break. So.
Got it.
And of course, I was still training through most of that. But
yeah, for sure. And for those listeners who aren't familiar with wheelchair rugby, I highly recommend you YouTube it because it is a brutal sport. It is very, very rough. Do you have any stories of kind of injuries or anything like that while you're playing?
So I don't know how well you can see it, but like my pinky finger is just now healing from an injury I had. I don't know, it's been probably 3 or 4 months now. So I kind of got turned weird, and somebody ran into the side of my wheel when my hand was down there, and they smashed my finger in between their chair and the wheel, and ripped half the nail off, and that was about my worst injury. There's not really too many more injuries than any able-bodied sports. It is full contact, so things do happen, but concussions once in a while, but still it's not as common as in football. Other than that, it's a lot of smashed fingers, broken fingers. Over the long term, like some shoulder injuries can start happening because your shoulders aren't designed to push a wheelchair, as I'm sure a lot of your medical followers know. So shoulder injuries is a big part of what we do, like stretching, warming up, and doing shoulder mobility exercises a lot and things like that. So.
Got it. I'm very interested in how you got involved with wheelchair rugby. Can you tell that story?
So I broke my neck. It was about 4 years ago on Memorial Day. And after you break your neck, you go get your surgery and all that, and then they send you off to like a rehab facility, essentially. So I went there and did all my OT and PT and stuff. I did that for about 2 months. And whenever I was there, a woman named Megan Gottlieb, this was back in St. Louis whenever I lived there. So she works at a place called DASA, Disabled Athlete Sports Association. So she would come in like once a month to the rehab facility and talk to people about sports for people with disabilities, stuff like that. And then she's also the manager of the rugby team. You mentioned wheelchair rugby, and they made a documentary in 2005, I believe, called Murderball, which is what the sport was originally called. So I watched that and I was like, man, this is awesome. So like I said, I broke my neck the end of May on Memorial Day weekend. Spent June and July in rehab. Right at the end of July, I went home, spent August and half of September not really doing much. And then halfway through September is when rugby practices started. So I was at the second one that they had about 2.5 months after my injury, and got in a chair and loved it and haven't turned back since. So
you told me a brief version of that story on the plane, and I was so surprised at how early you got involved with it.
Yeah.
And just something from a medical standpoint, when you have something big like that happen, a life-changing event, life-altering event, whether it be something physical or spinal cord injury, or even somebody getting diagnosed with cancer, it's almost like when you move forward and like offer something or try to get them to kind of see new opportunities and move on and kind of come to terms with it. Was that a good timing for you? Were you kind of pushed into that, or when you got approached with this whole idea with wheelchair rugby, how did that go?
So I don't know. A lot of people excuse me, whenever they get a spinal cord injury, obviously it's a pretty big life change, and it was for me too, but I adjusted really quick, I think, compared to everybody else. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just my personality, but I was like, before I even got out of rehab, I was like, well, a lot of people are like dead set on walking again, and they'll do 3 and 4 years of therapy trying to get back walking again. And for me, I was like, well, I can do that, or I can just kind of move on. And if I start walking again, I do. If I don't, then this is my new life, and kind of got used to it. And that happened pretty soon after my injury. Like I said, I didn't really give up hope on trying to walk again, but I figured if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Got it.
If not, I want to be prepared for that as well. So I started, kind of planning for the future of not being able to walk. So
right. It's very tough. And for those who, I do actually have a lot of followers from the St. Louis area. And DASA was a corporation, or I don't know if they're considered a corporation. It was a group that I ended up volunteering with, teaching martial arts to children with disabilities. But DASA is like the group, the sports association for athletes with disabilities. And so a huge shout out to them, because they have changed so many lives. And I know so many professional friends that have went through that and worked with them and teamed up and partnered and moved forward. And it's just such a cool organization. Who runs it?
Kelly.
Do you remember Kelly's last name? I want to give her a shout out.
Bielman, maybe?
What was the name?
Kelly Bielman, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's awesome. She's one of the greatest people you ever meet. And Megan Gottlieb, it's Megan Morgan now. But she is very involved with DASA and like one of their few full-time employees. I know they have a lot of volunteers. So
yeah.
But yeah, like those two, I mean, they're both two of the greatest people I ever met. And really helped me out quite a bit. So yeah, definitely deserve a shout out.
They definitely deserve a shout out and deserve a lot more for everything that they've done. So thank you too. Thank everybody who volunteers at DASA, because you are absolutely changing lives. Just such a cool group. And then you mentioned Murderball. I believe that documentary used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore.
I know it's for free on YouTube though.
It is for free on YouTube? Okay.
Go see it, yeah. I knew, or it was a year ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. So
that was actually my introduction into wheelchair rugby. So it is a good documentary. Go watch it if you're listening to the show.
And it's not just about rugby. It kind of talks about them adapting to their new lives and stuff. And it's very interesting to see like kind of a different perspective on being in a wheelchair, because they're definitely not, they don't look at themselves as fragile, I guess would be a good way to put it. And a lot of people do. So it's kind of refreshing to see somebody try and be a badass and not care about being in a chair that much. So
absolutely. So you travel a lot, and I was asking you, where all of you traveled. Can you tell the listeners kind of where all you've been in the world? You've been on the USA team? Yeah,
so I actually leave tomorrow. I have to pack up after we get done with this interview. I'm heading to Vegas for a tournament this weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been all over the place in the States for different tournaments and stuff. And then internationally, we went to Japan. Then we went to Paraguay last year, or 2 years ago rather. And then this past year we went to Australia for World Championships. We went to England for a tournament, and I think there's one more I'm forgetting in there. Yeah, maybe it was just England and Australia this past year, but
got it.
So kind of.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit of traveling. You're beating me currently with all your travels. With the amount of kind of everything you're doing, what's something that you know now that you wish you would have known, 2 years ago when you started getting involved with wheelchair rugby and traveling?
Oh, yeah. Invest in a good set of headphones. That's something my first trip to Japan, I think it was 13-hour flight, and I had like the crappy little United Airlines free headphones that they give you. And since then I went out and purchased it's not really even a great set of headphones, but it's a heck of a lot better than the free ones they give out. So I would say definitely do that. And yeah, that was probably my biggest one. And for other people in a chair, a good cushion is really important because you can't, kind of weird to say, but you're sitting the whole time as we are the whole time. But usually, like whenever I'm at home, I can get out and lay down in bed for half an hour on my stomach or whatever, and that helps out a lot. But being on an airplane for 16 hours, I think our trip to Australia was 16 hours. So having a good cushion for that is pretty important as well.
Got it. In addition to the headphones, if there is something you bought that's like less than $100 that has really helped you along your journeys.
I'd say the headphones is a big one. And to go back to the beginning of the podcast, Settlers of Catan, the app for that. I've spent a lot of time on airplanes playing that. I think it was $5, and I probably have used that $5 more than any other $5 I've spent in my life. So
for the listeners, Settlers of Catan is it's a board game, and I've tried to explain it before. Maybe you can help me out. It's a cross. It's almost like Monopoly, just in the amount of time it takes to play a game. Because some of these games, I think usually we ended up an hour and a half to 2 hours per turn. But it is just this board that kind of makeshifts, and you try and claim territories, and you're building walls, and you're trying to collect sheep, but nobody wants sheep. And so you're like trying to trade them around, and it's a really fun game. And they came out with an app probably the year I actually got interested in the board game. And I was surprised because you were saying that it doesn't require internet for you to play against the computer. So that's super cool. And I will probably download that, and all my Springfield friends can finally play me in Catan again.
Definitely. And you can get online and play with, I can play with people back home in St. Louis area and all that. So
it's got, I would call it a pretty cult following. There's huge Catan tournaments and stuff that people go to. I don't know how much people win or how those turn out, but I do know they exist.
I was trying to find them in Denver, but for some reason they don't have any in Denver. They have some in like the weirdest little small podunk Illinois town, but then none in Denver. So I was kind of sad about that.
That just means you got to start it, man.
Yeah, I guess so.
Settlers flag, market a little bit.
I guess so. I might have to do that.
Well, since you've been to so many places, what is your favorite travel story thus far?
So a big one, I don't know if this is my favorite, but it's definitely one of the more interesting ones. You said you have a lot of medical field followers, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you don't know, whenever you have a spinal cord injury, your bowel and bladder function doesn't quite work the same. And after our Paraguay championship game, they had like a little reception dinner party for us, and I was eating some strange fried meats and drinking Heineken beer, and we actually, so I think it was a Sunday we got done, and our flight was Monday morning at like 6 a.m. So we had to leave the hotel at like 2 a.m., which means we had to leave the reception thing at 10. So I got done playing our final game, our gold medal match of rugby, and went to this reception, left there, went straight back to the hotel, packed everything up, and got on the bus. So, but anyway, apparently the weird meats and the Heineken kind of upset my stomach a little bit, and had a bowel issue on the airplane. And that was very interesting. I was laying there sleeping, and all of a sudden I woke up, and it was happening. So, and I was in the middle seat, of course. So I had to have the guy on the end seat who's a teammate, also can't really get up and walk at all. So he had to transfer across the aisle, and then they had to get the aisle chair back for me, and I had to go into the bathroom, which the toilet seat was like 4 feet away, and that's a pretty tough transfer. So I fell on the ground trying to get onto the toilet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was definitely one of my more interesting traveling stories, but probably not my favorite.
Nonetheless. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's that might be people's biggest fears. Like, you just conquered something that people have nightmares about. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and now I always, every time the night before I'm getting on a flight, I make sure do my bowel routine and empty the tank, so to speak. So try to avoid that happening again.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. Following that story, what is a surprising challenge you have with traveling? And this can either be traveling with the team or traveling in a wheelchair.
Um, I wouldn't consider it so much a challenge, but a pain in the ass is like just the time it takes, especially with the team, because there are 12 of us that travel and maybe 2 or 3 that can walk, and walking's used pretty loosely there, but they can get around pretty well, to where they don't need the aisle chair. So everybody has to get on one at a time in the aisle chair, and we usually split up into 2 groups, so it's at least 6 of us. The coach is also in a chair, so 6 to 7. Once in a while, we end up on a flight all together, so it can be 12 athletes. But yeah, just waiting on the jet bridge. Somebody goes in, they have to transfer from their chair into the aisle chair on the jet bridge. There's 3 or 4 seatbelts they have to put on you. They have to take all the stuff that they need off their wheelchair off. So that takes a few minutes, and they got to go in, get back out of the aisle chair into the airplane seat, come back and get the next one. And we do that process 6 times, and it can take, half an hour, 45 minutes to get all of us on there. And then everybody else is waiting to get on, and that takes time, and they're getting frustrated, but it's a big pain in the ass moving all those people in wheelchairs. But
Got it. And something that you brought to my attention was the differences between some airlines with getting you on the plane. And that's something like I, even as a medical professional, never thought of. Could you talk about that?
Right. So another huge shout out here to Southwest Airlines. They the way they do it's really, really great, because like for United, we have to get in the aisle chair and do the whole Hannibal Lecter, get strapped up, and you're all in, confined in this aisle chair. But with Southwest, we get the pre-board, and they don't have assigned seating, so we just get to go in first, and so we can just hop our wheelchairs into the airplane and then reach the front row. We can't really go past the front row, and Southwest doesn't do too much, or I've at least never flown with them international. So it's usually only for like quick trips around the US that we get to do that. Yeah, so you just get to pull right on the airplane, hop off into the front row, and then they take your chair and put it under, and it takes about 5 minutes maybe instead of 10 to do the whole process. So
Right. Yeah, for sure. So you I know the team flies with a certain airline because they have a deal set up. What airline is that?
That's through United. So the US team has Team USA. Any US team has a contract with United, I guess. So.
Got it. And do they actually strap you in the chair?
Oh yeah, there's one that comes over each shoulder, and then one that goes across my knees, and then I think that's about it. So, and then they have to get the armrest down and then wheel you in there, and half the time the guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he runs into every chair on the aisle on the way down. That can be pretty frustrating.
So you'll be like mid-seat in the on the airplane somewhere, and they have to strap you in this chair and just drag you back, and you're probably like bumping elbows and stuff all the way back there. Do you get boarded first, or are people already in their seats and you're like?
No, so we do a pre-board, so we go on. So that part is nice.
Okay.
And Mandy is our team manager for the U.S. team, so she sets up all the flights and all that stuff. So she tries to get us all together. Because like another issue is going to the bathroom. Like if you have to pee, we use catheters, and so we don't have to go to the bathroom, but you can kind of pee right there in the chair. But if you're with 2 other random people in the middle seat, it's kind of like Kath and pee into a water bottle or something. So we all get to sit next to each other. Makes things a lot easier too.
Got it. Okay.
Everybody, all of us are used to it, and it's not nearly as big of a deal as some random stranger. So. Right,
for sure. And then that's how we actually met on Southwest. So Southwest is not a sponsor of the show, but they are welcome if they're listening. If I had a layover in Denver, and it was like the first time I've ever been in that situation. So I was like, I'm going to sit up front, and then that's where you ended up coming in. And then, so you get boarded first, even on Southwest. And then I
Right.
didn't realize that where they store your wheelchair goes in first as well. So that means you have to wait last to get off the plane.
Right.
They have to pull all the luggage out in order to access your wheelchair.
Right. Yeah. So I'm first on, last off, and yeah. So I have to sit there. I have to go in and go through all the headache of getting on the plane, then sit there for half an hour while everybody else boards, and then we land, and I'm ready to get out, but I got to wait for everybody to deplane, and
Right.
yeah. So that's probably another one of the bigger challenges is just waiting for everybody else.
Patiently. Get
Yeah.
to challenge your patience. Any surprising benefits traveling with the team or traveling with the wheelchair that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know if I'd call it a benefit really, but we don't have to go through the thing where you put your hands up like this and the microphone. So, and we get to cut it straight through the front of the line at the TSA lines, so we get to go through to the front. So if there's a long line, we don't have to wait for that. That's nice. At the same time, we have to check all our bags, run them through the scanner or whatever, and then we have to sit there and wait, and somebody comes out and does a pat down on you, and they do the whole swabs on your wheelchair, and that's something else that's kind of interesting. So in the US, it's probably a 10-minute process of doing all that, and then I have a little bag underneath of my chair that I keep my wallet, my phone, and a deck of cards, a lot of other random stuff, but so I have to empty all that stuff out and run it through the scanner. So that's another kind of pain in the butt. But yeah, so skipping the line is kind of nice, but at the same time, by the time I get my whole pat down and everything, everybody that is cut in front of them usually ends up beating me out anyway. So
yeah, got it. When you guys are traveling in as a team, are you wearing apparel all the time?
Typically, yeah. Yeah, we have so if we're traveling to a big tournament or something, we'll designate, because we get a lot of clothes, so it'll be all right, wear your red t-shirts and your blue shorts or blue sweaters or whatever. And you're gonna wear a jacket, wear this jacket.
Got it.
Try to kind of all be matching, but
yeah. Does that mean you guys get recognized?
Once in a while, somebody will. It's not really recognized as much as somebody sees 10 wheelchairs rolling through the airport, and they're like, "What are you guys doing here? You on a sports team or something?" They always think it's basketball. Oh no, it's wheelchair rugby, and they're like, "Oh man, that's so badass."
The bitterness, I could hear it a little bit. Always wheelchair basketball.
Yeah.
What is the biggest myth you found with traveling?
The biggest myth. That's a tough one. You warned me about that one earlier. The biggest myth.
Either traveling as an athlete or traveling in the wheelchair, maybe something that you were told and you just wanted to squash that myth.
That's kind of tough because I didn't really hear much. You know what I mean? I didn't know anything about traveling in a wheelchair until the first time I showed up at the airport, and it was with the St. Louis team. And there was other teammates there on the same flight, and I just kind of showed up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, hey, this is how this all works," and they kind of walked me through the process, because it is quite a bit different than whenever you travel as an able body, and if you don't travel much, going through the airport can be pretty confusing. Now, the Denver, St. Louis, and Birmingham airports, I pretty much know the back of my hand, because I go back and forth to St. Louis at home a lot, and I flew out of there for 2 years after I got hurt and started traveling a lot. And then Birmingham, Alabama is where our kind of our headquarters is. That's where we do all our training camps and stuff, or a lot of them.
Okay.
At the Lakeshore Foundation down there. Yeah, I know those airports all pretty well now, but yeah. So I guess to go back to your question, I don't really have any myths that anybody told me that were going to be. I just kind of got tossed into it and figured it out. So.
Got it. Where at in Birmingham is your guys' headquarters? Close to the University of Alabama, or?
I'm not too sure. So I fly in and take a bus there every time.
Okay.
I'm not really too familiar with the layout of Birmingham. Um, but I can say it's only about 10, 15 minutes from the airport.
Okay.
And I know that so it's like the Lakeshore Foundation they have like a hospital there as well. And it's a huge, very widely recognized like disabled sports area. I know they do a lot of work with UAB. So um, as far as location, I don't know, but I know they do get a lot of students like interning there and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. It's pretty big. It's actually a pretty big medical city. So definitely good schools there, and I know their physical therapy program there is pretty active as well, and the like you said, the athletics and disabilities community and stuff. For someone who is about to go on their first wheelchair flight or their first wheelchair travels, and us being medical professionals, what is something you would want to tell someone before they kind of step into it?
So make sure you zip up any bags that you have. Like it's very easy to hop into your seat and then be like, all right, I'm ready. And they take your chair away and you got your bag still open underneath. So don't do that. Then like my side guards that I have on my chair are removable. So I always take them out and put them in the overhead. And then put them back on whenever I get my chair up. Make sure right before you get in your chair and roll out of the airport that there wasn't any damage. Because a lot of times, like the loading doors and stuff, I've seen wheelchairs just get mangled.
Wow. Oh, wow.
That you could even imagine should be possible, but so yeah, but like before you get back in your chair, make sure your wheels are still straight and that kind of stuff. Make sure there's nothing really bent up or beat up. Grab the cushion out of your chair. If you're changing altitudes, if you have an air cushion, it kind of changes the pressure in there. So like whenever I leave Denver and land in St. Louis, my chair is always super deflated, or my cushion is. So I'd say kind of monitor that. Bring a cushion to sit on, like I think I mentioned that earlier. Make sure you got something comfy to sit on.
Okay.
Yeah, other than that, use the bathroom beforehand, and that's all I got.
What are some books, podcasts, or personalities, movies that you kind of follow that you would recommend to the listeners?
Oh man.
Can be about athletics, can be about travel, can be about woodworking, whatever you're into.
But I'm not really too big into the podcast or anything. I watch just about any movie that sounds interesting to me. The one podcast I do listen to quite a bit is Stuff You Should Know.
Okay.
They do like about hour-long segments on literally anything and everything. I think my favorite one I've listened to is Carrier pigeons, and they just talked about, or just pigeons in general, and all the different species of pigeons and how they work. And pigeons are a really interesting animal, I learned. So I like listening to that. That podcast is a really good one. I don't know. Outside of that, I don't really have any unique movies to mention that they wouldn't have heard of already. Murderball, maybe.
Murderball, yeah, it's a good one. Definitely, if you are listening to the show and you haven't seen Murderball, you should definitely watch it. YouTube it right now, unless you're driving, then wait. Let's see.
Is that all of them?
That's just about it. Jake, is there anything else that you would want to tell the listeners?
I will say this, because it's a medical field podcast. You said most of your listeners are medical field. I know for myself personally, getting involved in wheelchair sports and almost immediately after my accident helped. I mean, I could spend another hour talking to you about how much it helped me. Not necessarily the athletic aspect of it, but hanging out with 10 other people in wheelchairs, learning from them, any issues I'm going through, they've gone through already. So having that like kind of social network, it made my learning curve of being in a chair, like it just skyrocketed. I a year after my injury, I was more independent and able to do more things than people that have been in chairs for 5-10 years, because I just learned so much quicker because I had other people around. And like one of my teammates, my 1 year anniversary actually, so I broke my neck diving into a swimming pool, and a teammate of mine had a pool on the roof of his apartment building, and so he had me over to go swimming on my 1 year anniversary. And I show up over there. He lived over in St. Louis. I was still in Illinois at the time. So it was like a 45-minute drive, and I get over there. I get up to his place, and he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, the elevator goes up to like floor 17 or whatever, and there's 18 or 19 floors, and the pool's on the roof. So we have to go up like 2 or 3 flights of stairs." And I was like, "How do you do that?" And so he, like, just you get out of your chair and sit on the stairs, and if you have somebody helping with your legs, it's a lot easier, but you kind of grab the handrail there and just kind of scoot up each stair on your butt, and then somebody brings your chair and you hop back in it up at the top. So that was the first time I learned that. And if I hadn't played rugby, I probably wouldn't have done that till I was super comfortable, and it would have taken 4 or 5, 6 years to get to that point. But having somebody just be like, "Oh yeah, hey, you want to go swim? We got to do this." So I was like, "Oh, let's figure it out, I guess." So.
Yeah, I think the travelers listening to this can definitely relate with that. We just had a big meetup this past weekend in San Jose, and when it can feel lonely on the road when you're the only one that kind of contracting and going to these new places. But as soon as you meet somebody else that does it, it doesn't seem as crazy and weird and awkward.
Definitely.
It's like, oh yeah, like, you go to movies alone too. You go to dinner alone too. Like, it's not this big, like, oh my gosh, look at this poor sap who can't, find a dinner date. I think community is such a big deal. And so I can totally relate with finding somebody kind of going through that same situation, something as big as that. And all of a sudden you're not the only person, sitting on the wheelchair in the room. And now, there's 10 other guys there, there's 10 other gals there. I can definitely see how that would be a huge, huge help.
Yeah, for sure. And like, the community, and, it's, if you're having spasms that are doing something weird or whatever the case may be, any type of issue, you can be like, or if you keep getting UTIs or whatever, you have other people to bounce ideas off of. And I mean, that alone is huge. And then, not to mention the being physically active and getting to have like a competitive drive. And right after I got out of rehab, I was like, "Oh shit, I'm a piece of glass now. I'm super fragile, do anything crazy." And then show up at wheelchair rugby, and they're like playing into each other, going full speed in a wheelchair, and being able to, I don't know, I guess have that competitive fuel and that drive and desire. It's pretty helpful, and it's for your mental state of mind to have like a competitive edge or drive again.
Definitely. I was just having a talk with one of my friends about the importance of like competitions with goals, because if you have this, whatever the goal is, it could be losing 10 pounds, could be lifting 300 pounds off the floor, could be, doing X amount of pull-ups. Like, as soon as you go into a competition, all of a sudden you have some accountability and some competitiveness thrown in there. And so you're able to not only meet those goals, but usually surpass them, especially as you get involved with other persons who are pushing you, been through it before, did it 10 wrong ways and found out this one way that worked way better than the other 10. You can, pick their brain and just put you on a accelerated path, whatever it is that you want to accomplish.
To answer your earlier question, I guess my one thing that I want to say is, if you do know somebody that ends up with a spinal cord injury or some other life-changing event, I would say getting involved in sports is by far and away the number one thing that helped me in my recovery. And I know a lot of people are against it because it causes shoulder issues and this, that, and the other. And I'm not a medical professional by any means, but I know that does happen, and that's a concern. But just as a person that's been through it, any shoulder injuries that I have as a result of rugby, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like if it makes it worse, it makes it worse. But it's totally worth it to have that community and camaraderie and all that stuff. So I would definitely recommend anybody with a new injury or anything like that, go get involved in sports. And
absolutely,
as professionals, it's easy for you guys to help push that. So,
but yeah, thank you. I definitely agree with that. I think as more and more people get involved in these more extreme sports, and ultra marathoning or CrossFit, or being a triathlete, going 60 miles down the road, skiing 60 miles down a hill, like that is dangerous. And there's obviously a threshold that it's really dangerous. But I usually tell people, like, if you think being involved in a sport is dangerous, try sitting on a couch for X amount of years.
Yeah.
And, the benefits will always outweigh the negatives for most of that stuff. But thank you so much, Jake, for being so open with this. I was very intentful to make, in school, we were very aware that in the community you can come across as, wheelchair person, rather than like a person actually in the wheelchair. And so I was very intentful to make sure that came across, that you're not symbolized as that, but definitely appreciate the openness to talk about it and to share your stories. And as you're going on and traveling and seeing the world and building your house and stuff like that. So I'm putting it out in the universe now, so you have to do it.
All right, done.
Go in a house building competition, we'll figure it out.
All I need is like $200,000 and I'll be set.
All right. We get you on more of these shows. Get you some speaking gigs. We could do this.
I'd be open to the idea. Yeah, for sure. I had a great time, man. This is fun. So.
Thanks, Jake. For the listeners, if you have any questions for Jake Daly, you can tag him in the Facebook group at New Medical Nomads Facebook group. If you're looking for the official launches of these shows, they come on at the New Medical Nomads podcast on Facebook. If you want the early access, though, you can go to YouTube. You can go to Spotify. You can go to iTunes, any of your favorite podcasting apps, and subscribe there, and you will get the early notifications of when I first upload these, usually a week to two in advance. But as always, any likes, hearts, comments, reviews, subscribes, they all that engagement helps more people see this information and helps us help other travelers in the world, which is ultimately the goal of this podcast. So thank you so much again, Jake. This has been awesome. Been looking forward to this since we've been sitting on the plane.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. It was fun. I had a good time. Glad I did it. So.
And for all you nomads, everybody have safe travels.